I'm glad that we invited some of the better NGOs and better foreign funded NGOs. So we are not using caricatures to take pot shots at. We have to engage with some of you seriously, and some of you do represent better practices among NGOs. But it struck me when you were making your presentation, you kept using the word NGOs, CSOs, civil society organizations interchangeably. My point is, what do you say to organizations that don't even choose their own nomenclature themselves? I remember in the 70s they were called voluntary organizations, and for about 2 decades we heard of them as VOs, till many of us said, what is this voluntary organization business, when almost all of them pay themselves. Voluntaryism means you don't do paid labor. And so the nomenclature, for whatever reasons, was changed by the funding agencies to NGOs, non-governmental organizations. My problem with this hideous word is anybody who defines themselves as as a starting point, doesn't take herself or himself very seriously. In any case, as Professor Vaidyanathan pointed, too many of them are embedded in the government, if not Indian government, embedded in the foreign governments from whom they draw funds. And now recently, in the last decade or so, the nomenclature has once again changed by funding agencies to CSOs, civil society organizations. And I have the most serious problem to the CSOs, because for me, civil society organizations are those that draw support and sustenance from the society itself. For me, Khap Panchayats are civil society organizations, whereas most NGOs or CSOs, so-called, are almost always at war with civil society in India. They think we are not good enough, we are too backward, we need to be reformed through very draconian laws. Now that doesn't include the kind of work, Venkatesh, that you're doing, and therefore I added a rider right at the beginning. So my serious please think of a dignified name for yourself. People did that in this society for long years. They decided what to call themselves. Now, let's face it, all of us, whether NGOs or VOs or CSOs, we are all, or Madhukeshwar, we are all self-appointed reformers. We make fun of politicians. They go and ask people for vote, but at least they go and ask people for vote before they mess around. All of us, without as much as by your leave, think we should have the right to decide what the society must be doing, should be doing, how they should reform, what kind of cough and sneeze is allowed. And to me, therefore, it's very important, because we are self-appointed, because we do not take any endorsement from the society on whose behalf we claim to talk. It's extremely important that we stay modest and we keep checking ourselves all the time, whether we are in tune with the desires, aspirations, requirements of our own society, or the society that we claim to want to reform. Now, you had, ma'am, raised this point about where are credible indigenous organizations. I think that's really one of the big damages that the NGO, foreign-funded NGO culture has done to India, which is that it has come to monopolize social and political space in a manner that all indigenous social activity, welfare activities, service providers who are doing enormous work have been completely overshadowed. And I can tell you, as an organization, Manushi, because right at its inception we took a very firm decision not to be tied to the apron strings of any foreign funded organization or government, we don't get an iota of the kind of visibility that foreign funded NGOs get. You do something with the aid of Bill Gates Foundation or Ford Foundation, the clout of your funding agency itself ensures that media covers you well, because you have embedded journalists too who are forever globetrotting on behalf of these, funded and financed by these organizations. Tell me one national or international award that has been gotten in recent years. Any Magsaysay, any XYZ to indigenous social organization. No. You have to be funded by Ford or Bill Gates or XYZ in order to even get nominated. And almost all of them have been. Please track that down. So this clout, the funding clout, not just of the donor agency, but also the government of that country that's backing them, because the two usually work closely, decides the visibility and clout of your activism. And without it, you stand nowhere. And I can tell you, as one of the oldest social organizations in India, of this phase, not forever, but that started in the 70s, I can tell you it's an uphill task to even get a hearing, modest hearing, from either media or from politicians if you don't come with that clout. Now, India has a long history. There was, Madhavan, I wish he was here. He was talking about how difficult it is to raise funds, how government exercises controls as if foreign funding comes without any strings. But I think we need to learn from our own history. Let's not go too far into history, but 19th century, the beginning of so-called modern India. A whole range of social organizations emerged all over the country. Arya Samaj in Punjab, Brahmo Samaj in Bengal, Pratna Samaj in Maharashtra, and every state of India witnessed the mushrooming of a whole range of social organizations that were rooted within their own communities in their own cities, that raised funds from the local people. All these social reformers started by dipping into their own pocket and then mobilizing their own community. And mind you, they built huge empires, educational empires. Look at Arya Samaj, for example, one of the largest educational empires in India, and I can give any number of other names. So many caste associations, who've also built. These are also, in my view, NGOs, if you will. I hate the term, but for lack of a better terminology for the moment. Now, every issue, they also did advocacy, whether in favor of widow remarriage, banning of or ending child marriages, or women's education. They also ran powerful advocacy campaigns, policy reform campaigns. But the interesting thing is, almost all of them, whichever issue they took up, they succeeded. There's actual evidence that they succeeded in whatever task they undertook, however imperfectly, but they didn't draw a blank. Now compare them to modern day NGOs, and their impact in terms of actual impact on the ground is directly reverse proportion to the funding and the noise they make. Whether it's banning dowry or banning feticide, the sex ratio keeps declining, but their noises keep increasing against feticide. They haven't succeeded in even one issue thus far in any serious way, in any impactful way. And I think the primary reason is that this kind of activism that NGOs represent is truly rootless. Their own neighbors will not give them even 100 rupees. Forget neighbors, their own relatives will not give them 20 rupees for their many noble causes. But the government of India or the international donor agencies and many foreign governments are willing to give them crores of rupees every year, in many cases not even asking them for too much accounts. provided they use a certain kind of jargon, provided they use certain kind of catchphrases, and they're broadly within a certain kind of ideological framework. And it's because this activism is rootless. It does not owe accountability. See, money account. One of the reasons we said no to donor agency money is because I want to remain accountable to my society. When Colonel Daya gives me even 200 rupees, you know, that matters to me much more than $200 million coming from elsewhere, because it means he's dipping into his pocket, means I have won a supporter already. So even those 10 rupees, 20 rupees, 100 rupees, 500 rupees matter much more, because you are winning people's hearts at the same time. When somebody dips into their pockets to even give you modest amount, that means you're actually drawing support from your society. And I've always believed, if I fail to draw that support from my own society, I may as well be dead. Why do I have to be there? If my society doesn't need me, doesn't value my work, why must I be there? And which is another reason why I kept my own livelihood absolutely apart from my social work, my political work, so that I don't have to keep Manushi alive to keep myself floating or alive. The other, because of this lack of accountability, most of our NGOs, and they are accountable to their funders abroad, their reports have to be sent there, they invariably come as attacking outsiders, be it on the issue of dowry, be it on the issue of sati, be it on the issue of honor killings. They will not go and talk to the communities concerned whose practices they have problems with. Therefore, as I said, they won't even talk to their own relatives. They want the most draconian laws to be implemented without even talking to their own close relatives to say, would you be willing to accept such a law? What do you have to say about it? And this kind of approach of coming to people, to our society, as attacking outsiders. Since Colonel Daya is here, the whole issue of honor killings is a very good example. With such shoddy research work, they decided cops must be banned because cops are doing honor killings, when their own data points to the contrary. They go to Supreme Court and say cops should be banned, and get the case heard in Supreme Court. Small, piddly, squeaky NGOs go to the Supreme Court, are able to have the Supreme Court judges dance to their tunes and come up. They're ready. The Supreme Court was ready with a law to ban cops and even their meetings, even casual meetings of families, till Manushi stepped in on behalf of cops and said, please at least give us a hearing. You cannot pass a law against us without as much as we hear you. The Law Commission had drafted a law banning these organizations, millennia-old organizations, with such flimsy evidence against them that, you know, the papers that they prepared are not even worth toilet paper. We could tear their studies to shreds and halt that law. So the point that I'm trying to make is we're tired of this civilizing mission continuing despite the British having left. I'd rather have the British come directly, or the Americans, whoever wants to civilize, I'd rather deal with them than their proxies. They are a bloody nuisance, because I tell you, the British actually did better homework than our NGOs and our modern day government, which has outsourced the entire policy making and legislation to NGOs. Look at any ministry and its bodies which make these, draft these laws. Look at Law Commission and the consultations they hold. Did they talk to cops when they had drafted a law against cops? No. They only talked to certain NGOs, self-appointed reformers. And the laws, each one of them, that the NGOs have invited on us, in the name of social reform, in the name of strengthening women's rights, in the name of strengthening child rights, in the name of improving school education, they're not only draconian, they're nonsensical. Each one of them is doing more harm than good. I urge you to read two of my books. One is called Zealous Reformers, Deadly Laws. It's to do with feminist legislation, the idiocy of the kind of laws that the feminist NGOs have thrust on us, the kind of backlash they're creating because they're so horrific in their basic intent, as well as my other book and an introduction to it, Deepening Democracy, which provides you a critique of NGO politics. The point that I'm trying to make is, it's because of lack of financial roots in this society, social roots in this society, NGO agendas actually change according to the flow of funds. As an old hand at this game, and since many of my very dear friends, who remain my dear friends, we may differ on many issues, I have seen how their own concern, how their emotions, their emotive outbursts depend on what funding is available for which cause. I remember, for example, just to give you quick examples, 1985 or 86, UN declares it as the year of the media. So suddenly all feminist NGOs are women in media, women in media, women in media. And what can you do for women in media? Have a law banning XYZ portrayal, obscene portrayal of women in the media. Again, another utterly nonsensical law. Next year, it's the year of the girl child. They dump media and they dump women and they chase girl child. After that, it's the year of piggery, and then everybody is after pigs and piggery. Chicken feed to chicken feed. I say it openly, you give me $500 million and I can make anything politically fashionable in this country, the way NGOs, and it's not for nothing that AIDS, which has lots of money, foreign money coming in, is sexy and politically fashionable. But malaria isn't. Malaria kills many more people in India. Diarrhea isn't, which is responsible for at least 70% infant deaths in this country. That's not politically fashionable. But AIDS is. How many people die of AIDS every year? Far less, I can tell you, than die of malaria, tuberculosis, and many easily preventable diseases, but they're not issues. Why? Because money is not available, foreign funds are not available for it. Now, the other serious problem I have with these NGOs is the tendency to internationalize all issues. Sati takes place in Deorala. They don't go to Deorala to find out what happened, to commiserate with Roop Kamar's family, or actually do an honest investigation. They start yelling from TV studios at how backward, how whatever these people are, they should be banned, this should be done, Rajput should be eliminated from the surface of this earth because they don't know how to treat their women. And then, not stopping at that, then there are jet-setting conferences in Stanford one day, in Columbia University another day, in Tokyo third day, in Norway, Sweden. I don't see the point of it. I don't see the point of poverty peddling, misery peddling. Does anybody in America come, if there is a racial riot in America? I've never seen Americans run to India to say, "Hi Tawba, please save us, our society is so horribly divided, we are such horrible people, we don't know how to treat fellow citizens." But that's what we do. One riot in Gujarat in 2002, my God, how many people have encashed it to what wonderful effect. And how many of them went to Ahmedabad or went to Kodra to talk and try to do bridge building? No. Instead of building bridges, instead of finding measures to stop these atrocities, and I'm not saying we shouldn't pay attention to them, but we need to pay attention to them where they're happening. We also need to change social norms by actual work among the communities that we think are not acting as per our requirements. And once you take people seriously, once you are willing to engage with them, I see no problem. Actually, India is one of the most easy to, Indians are among the most easily appealable people. You appeal to the moral conscience of Indians, and it's rarely failed. Whether on the issue of dowry, or on the issue of feticide, or on the issue of honor killings, it took us no time, just a few dialogues with Khap Panchayats before they came to a unanimous, they passed unanimous resolutions, senior Khap leaders, that they would stand steadfastly against honor killings. It took very little effort. All it took was taking them seriously, taking them into confidence, and discussing it with an open mind, listening to their legitimate grievances on this issue. And it took very little time and effort to arrive at a new social consensus, which already is working wonders in Haryana. Now, also working on divisive agendas, not bridging divides, widening them. I think that to me is one of the worst sins that many NGOs, not you Venkatesh, you work on different issues, I've already put you in a different category. But divisive agendas, it's always pitching one group against the other. It's the class struggle, this standard, classic, Marxist class struggle model. Workers of the world permanently at war with the capitalist of the world. And they've transferred it onto every social group. Women versus men permanently at war. So have one of these feminist NGOs enter your domestic life, divorce नहीं भी होती तो हो जाएगी. जूते नहीं भी चलते तो सर फूटेंगे. ये net result होता है. Instead of bridging divides, they're constantly widening. So it's workers against employers, landless workers against farmers, never mind in the process, farming itself gets destroyed, women against men, and not finding ways of, as I said, bringing people together, bridging divides. Also and with huge gross exaggerations and overstatements. The manner in which the Gujarat riots, as I said, have been milked, with gross overstatements, with gross exaggerations, and making it out to be a case of genocide, for instance. Some total of people who died were 1,000, out of which over 250 were Hindus, the rest Muslims. Lot more Hindus died in police firing than Muslims. And the point that I'm trying to make is, but these facts, the gray areas are never brought in, nuances are never brought in. It's genocide. And in the process, what have we done? Put India on the top of the hit list of all international jihadis. That India is a country where minorities are being crushed, they are being ruthlessly eliminated, there's genocides being carried out. This is far from truth. Even Bollywood does a better job of portraying Hindu-Muslim relations, even while they may deal with the problems that minorities may face. But not dealing with the vibrant democracy that is India, and making it out to be a case where all we have is series of civil wars between one group and the other, I think has done us a lot of harm. And finally, I would say, of course, the corruption element. Professor Vaidyanathan has already briefly dealt with it. That's a serious problem. Jet-setting, five-star culture, to my very old-fashioned mind, it just doesn't go with the spirit of social do-gooding. I believe, I'm old-fashioned enough to believe, even though I don't insist that everybody follow my formula, but I do believe you should enter social and political life only when you have something to give. You serve the cause, not make the cause serve you. That's my very simplistic formula, and certainly not in cash poverty, not peddle poverty and make money out of it. So at the end, I would say I have 6 proposals. Um, 2 of them echo what Professor Vaidyanathan said. However critical I am of these NGOs, I seriously believe knee-jerk reactions will not do. Arbitrary witch hunting will not do. Even with Greenpeace, whether I support their activity or I don't, whether I think they're pro-India or anti-India, doesn't matter. But you don't do what the government of India has done, which is humiliate this woman by catching her. In the process, of course, she's become a martyr and a big heroine. That's what government of India does. They think they were going to teach them a lesson. On the contrary, government of India has put itself in the dock. This won't do. Due process must be followed. Therefore, I would like to propose, and I would like your feedback on the following 6 points. An inquiry commission, a judicial inquiry commission, high-powered but time-bound, not like the Kudal Commission, which destroyed all Gandhian institutions. Time-bound inquiry to tell us what the government of India has against this or that NGO or the NGO sector in general, what it has to say about foreign funding. We are not convinced that IB reports are the right way of going about it. We know the credentials of the IB are actually worse than that of the worst of NGOs. So we don't want IB reports to be the determining factor. We want an open, transparent judicial commission. It should be open to public, not held in camera. Those involved in scams and misuse of funds for inappropriate purposes should be appropriately punished, but only after due process. Third, clearer definition of activities defined as political under the FCRA. FCRA ostensibly bans political activity, but we know organizations like Unheard, Citizens for Justice and Peace, तीसरा सेटलवाद political activity कर रही थी कि social welfare कर रही थी when she was battling BJP on behalf of Congress. So lot of our NGOs have become proxies as fighting swords for this or that political party, and I think this needs to be defined. Also, advocacy for change in legislation. We want this or that law change. Does it come under political activity or does it not? So much clearer definitions we need so that the NGOs also know what's their legitimate domain and where they must, what kind of Lakshman Rekha they must maintain. I personally am in favor of banning foreign funding of NGOs. No civilized society allows foreign governments to dictate agendas, especially considering in India, given the state of our government, NGOs have actually come to substitute for our government has had, at least UPA government had outsourced a lot of political, legislative activity to NGOs. If they have to do it, and I think they have a right, NGOs have a right to do it, but at least shouldn't be foreign funded. Now, which doesn't mean we starve NGOs or social do-gooders like me, or self-appointed reformers like me of all sources of funding. Those of us who can appeal to the conscience of our society and draw funds, very good. Those who find that job easy, not easy, should also have a way of getting legitimate funding, and I suggest that the corporate social responsibility tax, the 2% tax that the government is going to levy, should be created into a special fund called National Social Service Fund. It's going to yield thousands of crores and will keep increasing, but this should be managed not by the government but by an independent commission, both at the central level as well as at the state level, pretty much on the lines of the Election Commission of India. which has a certain autonomy, rules, transparency, so that we can all call it to account as it goes about dispersing these funds. And they should be available for social service organizations as well as advocacy campaigns, service delivery, people who want to run hospitals or schools or whatever. The entire range of things, we should be able to draw on that. And NGO accountability should involve not just occasional auditing or submitting annual returns. I think it should be mandatory for all NGOs to do something that Manushi has done for long years, which is post all our accounts on our website, on our respective websites. They should be available publicly. If we are working for the public, then everybody, without even demanding filing an RTI application and getting a half-baked reply, this should come as a normal procedure that all our finances